The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary.
Hello and welcome to It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media industrial business complex located somewhere on the outskirts of town. I am joined by my partner in benevolence, Steve. How are you doing this fine day?
Hey, we're recording on a Sunday morning, and so it's football day. I may be the only Redskins fan in America that's excited about this game. By the time you hear this, you will know how bad it got. But I, nonetheless, am still wearing my traditional Sunday Redskins t-shirt, and I'm excited. But beyond that, there's a bunch of wacky sports business stories, and we're cutting a couple of them out because they're just too over the top. But we've got a great show coming up anyway.
All right, let me give you a little bit of a sneak peek of what we'll talk about this show. We're going to talk a little bit about this new California law that is quote-unquote an existential threat to the existence of the NCAA. We'll then head to baseball, and of course, fall classic baseball season, but we won't actually talk about really pro baseball, but we will talk about their balls to the noggin issue with foul pole nets and foul balls screaming into the stands, and we will also look at the Rockies ownership making some interesting proclamations about its business model, and we will end with our regular fall check-in on how the heck the NFL is doing on the Idiot Box. But, Steve, let's jump into our first big meaty topic, which I suspect we could talk about for years to come.
Yeah, okay. So we on this show have consistently talked on a fairly regular basis about the proposal / idea / wish that college athletes could be compensated for playing sports in college. Well, the state of California, which I generally think needs to be chopped off and dumped into the ocean because it's full of a bunch of wacky people and stupid people who are running the state, have passed a law that is sort of forcing the NCAA's hand on this. And this is the Fair Pay to Play Act, I believe it's called. And the deal is this. And this doesn't take place or become effective until 2023. So there's, 3.5 years to go for this. But what they have done is they have passed a law that says college athletes can market themselves to advertisers and basically can earn a paycheck more or less while they're playing sports. The reason why this is a problem for the NCAA is that the NCAA rules prohibit this. And so, I don't think anybody really cares if, the second baseman, on the University of Illinois baseball team goes and works at Lowe's or something. Nobody cares about that. But what I think the NCAA is really afraid of is, if you have, Kyler Murray had gone and signed with Nike, and made millions of dollars during his collegiate experience, or Zion Williamson or somebody like that. That is what they're afraid of. But now the California law, which is the only law like this in the country, but there are like 6, 7, 8 states which are contemplating bills like this. The California law allows them to do this, so it's in direct contravention of the NCAA rules. Mark Emmett, who's the head of the NCAA, sort of begged the state of California not to do this, and they did it anyway. But like I said, there's 3 years, really 3.5 years to figure this out. Now, the consequences to this ultimately could be that the NCAA just kicks all the D1 universities in California out of the NCAA. That would be extreme, but if it's not worked out in 3.5 years, they may have to do that. So I'll save my thoughts. That's kind of the background. Chris, you want to start with your thoughts?
Sure. Well, one, California, I love you.
God.
Love going there. Love the people. So
Oh,
just on the
God.
record here, I'm pro California, 100%.
I knew there was
It's a wonderful
something I didn't
place.
like about you.
California is great. I love this. What's more American than a state deciding what to do on its own accords to attack a dumb, slow, bloated, and antiquated institution that exists mostly off tradition and not off practically how the world works, to open up a larger free market to its citizens who now have the chance to evolve with the fast state of individual commerce on new business models while continuing to build out financial models for more of its citizens. I think it's a uniquely American thing. I love the fight that they're picking. That's how the system is supposed to work. Young guns are supposed to take out bloated institutions, right?
Yeah, I have I wouldn't say mixed feelings, but I can see both sides of this argument. And first of all, just for the record, the people who filed California need to go away, and Gavin Newsom needs to be launched in a rocket to Mars or something, because he's a complete moron. But be that as it may, the idea of less government regulation and the free market sort of taking hold and allowing people to earn what they earn, I'm all for that. And so the idea that if, pick a player, Kyler Murray is able to go out and earn whatever he's supposed to earn while being in college, conceptually that's a good thing, right? Because that's capitalism. That's what America is actually all about. So I fully agree with that.
I think I just made that point.
Yeah, I know, but so I'm agreeing with you on that, which is amazing that we're agreeing on this. Here's the other side to it, though. Just allow me to play devil's advocate. And this is also a part that I kind of don't like. For 99% of people, this isn't going to be a problem. And again, if you have, like the center fielder on the, Wisconsin baseball team goes to a car dealership and does some ads, who cares, right? Nobody cares. But generally speaking, I think what the NCAA is haphazardly, badly, and stupidly going about is trying to prevent the professionalization of college sports. And as a sort of a basic construct, I don't disagree with. Because what I don't think is a good idea is if you have like these guys, somebody give me a name besides Kyler Murray. He's out of college, But if we have the star player on the new star player on the OU football team has a team of agents. He's got attorneys. He's got lawyers in the locker room in college, and what it really becomes is sort of the professionalization of college. That's what the NCAA is trying to avoid, and that's what I really don't want either. Because there's already enough problems with collegiate sports. What I don't think you want is agents, managers, and lawyers in the locker room. These are hypothetically supposed to be students, and so the idea that the NCAA sort of wants to prevent that, I get it, and it's kind of a good idea. Just the problem is, by preventing that, what you're doing is stopping capitalism, and that's never a good idea. So I think to me it's more of a quandary than you might think. And from the players' perspective, they're all for it because they can earn money, and I understand that too. I just don't want college sports to become basically pretend pro sports. Because as much money as there is in college sports right now, it is different because these players aren't negotiating with anybody. They don't have teams of people around them, all that stuff. Whereas if you let this go too far, that's what's going to happen. And then any semblance of amateurism is going to go away. And so that's the part I don't like.
There is a certain, trying to look for who the senior on the Stanford men's basketball team is. They're actually a pretty young team. Because basketball, not football, will be where will be the Petri dish of test case where this emerges, I would guess. There is the traditionalist institutionalist, which does reside and has some solid real estate in my heart, mind, and soul, that understands what you're saying. But I just think it is so antiquated and such a myth already And the NCAA has been such a badly run organization, all about protectionism, not innovation and advancement, and being able to stay ahead of these things, and has been so ineffective. And you can talk everything from the institution-wide sex scandals throughout. I think there's one brewing right now in swimming that we'll probably talk about in a future show, similar to gymnastics, to all of just its inability to keep up with modern times and its inability to figure some of these things out, even where things like the schools, all of the people that are benefiting financially, gorge. So I just feel like when you've become that bloated, that big, and that stupid, something's taken you down, and I'd rather actually accelerate that, even perhaps to the point of being able to protect some more modern semblance of what college athletics looks like. And yes, that probably means the creation of hybrid professionalized leagues at the top level, which is things we've talked about in the past. But all this is, to me, the exciting part of this, before I get into, even some of the things around individuals monetizing themselves, which is a much different landscape now than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. That's exciting that there's something that's going to challenge this behemoth that needs to be taken out.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the NCAA is just a worthless hulk and shell of an institution. Their rules are antiquated. Their business, the way they operate is antiquated. They're corrupt. They're very clearly in it for themselves. They just blatantly ignore problems. In order to protect the income streams. They let Penn State continue to play. They're doing their darndest, it seems like, to keep this college basketball scandal under the ropes. All that stuff, and we've talked about most of the stuff on the show. So I agree with you there, and maybe the NCAA just needs to go. Honestly, I mean, it's become such an awful thing that maybe it just needs to go. Maybe it needs to be disbanded, and someone needs to form a new NCAA type organization that runs things. Maybe that's what needs to happen. I still just don't. I guess I haven't changed my mind though about fundamentally. I don't want professionalism in college sports. I think it's bad enough, as it is, and I don't think that's really a good thing. If you've got people making millions of dollars, in college locker rooms, and I just, let's just not. Why pretend they're students if that's the case? I guess that's my problem with it. Here's the other angle to all this. That's part of the story. Now, what we've talked a lot about on this show about how to fix these problems, and what always seems to come up is Title IX. And Title IX is the federal law, in Title IX of the U.S. Code, that says that, in essence, universities have to spend as much time and money on female sports as male sports. And it's technically not 50-50, I don't believe. I think it's 60-40, actually. But the point is, you can't have universities paying more attention and more money on men's sports than female sports. And that's the reason why there's, a lot, and many universities have more female teams than male teams. And that's why. So, is this bill a violation of Title IX? I would argue no, it's not. This is a unique solution that California's come up with. Because the problem would be if the universities are paying Tua Tagliavola at Alabama millions of dollars, and then the swim team gets $5. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about capitalism. We're talking about third parties paying them pursuant to what the market dictates are owed. And so in that respect, I think you do get past Title IX on this. And so this is really the first proposal that kind of, it doesn't solve the problem, but it avoids the problem. So I think that's an interesting thing. So that's Title IX. I think Title IX isn't a problem.
And to speak, to talk about your love of the citizenry of California, Steve, this law was written and proposed by a female state representative from the People's Republic of Berkely, California. So to say that this was some kind of like interesting way or end around to Title IX by its intent would be false. And I think it's actually somewhat brave that somebody from that vantage point would be willing, because I would agree with you, by the way, but that doesn't mean it doesn't put into threat the issue of Title IX, right? It's an aggressive move towards it. She may think that there's ultimately a way through it, to your point, but that doesn't mean it doesn't put it right in the crosshairs here. So it's a really interesting challenge from that standpoint, too, that this came from that vantage point and is somewhat willing to put Title IX on the table to solve this problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure this sponsor of this bill out in Berkeley is some pinko socialist commie, I get it. And it's quite frankly a bit odd that she would support capitalism, somebody like this. So I get that too. It's not, I'm weirdly enough not against this because again, the free market ought to always win. It goes down the road of Title IX problems a little bit in that if, I suppose if the university somehow managed this problem, that's a bad way to say it. If the universities sort of end up playing middleman for all these third party contracts that these players are going to enter into, then maybe you have a problem Title IX wise. But if they just kind of stay out of it, I think we're fine. I think we're fine. And let me just say this, by the way, and this is probably contrary to the prevailing opinion, and that's fine. I don't really care a whole lot about these players whining about not making money in college. Look, you're getting a scholarship. I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. Just generally speaking, that you're not making millions. Look, sorry, dude. You're supposed to be a college student, and so the idea that you guys think you're owed millions of dollars from your university because you're a star basketball player, I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. I truly don't. I don't necessarily think the university needs to pay you. They're already compensating you with a scholarship. So, these whining from, these college players, cry for me, Argentina, about that. But this part of it, I kind of get. If you want to go down and get the sponsorship to the car dealership, the NCAA do not have a problem with it. But, I think it's a bit odd that this woman out in Berkeley supports the law like this because you just wouldn't think somebody like that would be about capitalism. Nancy Skinner is her name, by the way. Nancy Skinner, the Nancy Skinner types of the world usually are about government takeovers, not other things.
Well, maybe the world isn't so black and white, Steve, I might suggest, but
I think it is.
No, it's not. NCAA will definitely use Title IX in its defense, so they'll use it as a shield. I can tell you can guarantee that. And it really is interesting that, as you said in your introduction, the law really gives until 2023 to figure some of this out. But
right.
Laws coming in South Carolina, Florida, New York, I think a couple other states. I think one of them, I think it's either Florida or New York, but if its measure goes through, it puts the timeline at like April 2020. There's some of these laws that will greatly accelerate some of the legal battles and some of the coming conflicts. There's not this built-in kind of 3 years to sort of sort through this. So this might get more interesting faster if other states' laws end up get signed into law. The piece that's interesting here, and where I think the argument is different here as we sit 2 decades into the 21st century, is that it has never been easier to monetize yourself. And so how do you restrict individuals' rights to be able to do that? And so you can use the shoe contracts and those kinds of things, and even the traditional, signing autographs or other ways that players, even 20 or 50 years ago, car dealership models, etc. But what do you do with the female volleyball star where there's with a monetized YouTube account?
Well, that's technically speaking is a violation right now.
Right, but how could a court, especially if they're doing nothing else, but how do you restrict an individual's ability to do that just because they're accepting a scholarship is a really interesting question. And it just wasn't possible to earn money off yourself in that way in the just, kind of recent past. And so I think there are those things that make this a much more interesting question now.
Yeah, well, okay, so let's talk about that, because you can also monetize other platforms too, not just YouTube.
Oh, sure,
there's
of
other
course.
way to. So, the star volleyball player monetizes her YouTube account. And nobody could stop her from getting on there and doing an analysis of the games, talking about other things, doing funny videos. What you couldn't do, where she would get in trouble, is by taking game film, because she doesn't have the rights to the game film. And so in that respect, the university could make a copyright claim on those videos and stop it. And so that will kind of take care. That part of it will take care of itself. But she ought to not be stopped from just getting on YouTube and doing whatever she wants. And, people are going to, I would argue there are no star volleyball players in terms of, but your point is valid nonetheless.
But the thing is, Steve, it's the scale, the monetizable scale is different at that level, right? Because there's enough of a fan base around college women's volleyball to flip into something like a monetized YouTube
Is there,
account.
though?
Yes, because you're talking about much different kinds of monetization models that, if someone becomes a star in that circle, it's still probably guaranteed somewhere in a million hits, just because, collegiate volleyball, international women's volleyball, you can make money in a smaller market with this long tail aggregated. You can connect to those, all you need is a million people. A million people globally is not that big a deal. So if you can garner that, you don't need the kind of scale it takes to sell shoes.
Yeah, and you may be right. I don't know. That may be right, and it doesn't really matter anyway. Your point you're making is valid. And just in case people don't understand this, who aren't social media people, how YouTube monetization works is basically you get to a certain level of subscribers and views, and then they'll let you start monetizing it. That's the bottom line. And they used to monetize everything. And, YouTube got tired of paying, $5 out to people because it's a waste of their money to pay that little. And so now there's a limit. And so pick your college athlete, whoever it is, starts a YouTube channel, builds it up to where it's monetized, he or she ought to be able to do that, just understanding that you can't violate copyright laws, for your YouTube channel. And that applies to everybody.
That's just like we can't use Led Zeppelin as the introduction to this podcast.
Yeah, right. And because we've had a few of our YouTube videos get nabbed for copyright violations for various things. It's mostly like, we've used one or two songs we shouldn't have. We've had, the NFL's claimed, one or two of them, for game film. So it's the same thing. So those issues are no different. So I agree with you in that kind of thing ought to not be a problem. Like if Tua Tagliavoa started a YouTube channel, it would instantly have millions of followers, right? Instantly. And so he would be able to make money like that. And who's to say the NCAA should get in the way of it? Why do they care? They care because they're trying to prevent. If you give them the benefit of the doubt here and subscribe a angelic motive to this, which is dumb because that's not what it's about. But if you do, they're trying to prevent the professionalization of college sports. And so that would be the argument. You don't want millionaires in locker rooms. But we all know what it really is about. It's just protecting income stream for themselves. And that's why you won't find very many people against it because, and again, the NCAA doesn't really care about one thing the NCAA has proven is they don't care a whit about actual athletes. What all of these rules are really about is just protecting the income for the universities and for the people running the NCAA. That's really what it's really about, and that's why most people, including me, have no sympathy for the NCAA either. So,
and that's what just to me, like, even because I have some conflicted feelings about this as well. I said as an admitted institutionalist, traditionalist, at least partly, but what I love about this is just the tinderbox nature of it. Like this stuff, it's got to get blown up. It was going to blow up anyway. I'd almost rather accelerate some of that and tear it down and see what can come of it than just the slow death, but where none of this is even, no version of college athletics can survive.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, so We're going to jump into a couple baseball hot topics, or at least topics that we find interesting. And one is, I think we visited this probably early in the baseball season at some point around this idea. I think it was after a pretty horrific injury, I think to a young girl at a minor league game. But this issue of the foul balls screaming into the stands, netting, liability, what risk fan takes by entering the stadium, et cetera, et cetera. But a new study has come out that starts to break down just how frequent this is happening. And I have to say, I was in the camp of like, are we going to legislate the heck out of this for a couple of random fly balls? But Steve, you'll introduce some numbers here from a study that suggests it is far from a few random fly balls.
Yeah, this is actually from NBC News. And so their political bent aside, NBC News has, certainly credibility in my eyes in that regard. They did an investigation and they found 808 reports of injuries to fans from baseballs from 2012 to 2019. And we're talking about Major League Baseball, here. So that's a lot. I mean, I never would have guessed that there's that many. In what we hear about on TV are the ones where people end up in the hospital. It was at an Astros game, I think. Wasn't it an Astros game the last one?
Oh, was
happened?
It? It wasn't a minor league game?
I think it was at I think it was an Astros game. And I know somebody died, a couple days later after getting hit at a Dodger game, a couple years ago. But what we never hear about is if the ball goes into the stands, it hits somebody in the shoulder, and they end up having to go get their shoulder treated. Nobody knows about that, and that doesn't make the news at all. And that's what NBC investigated and figured out. And I mean, gosh, that's a lot. You shouldn't have to worry about your safety while attending a entertainment event, right? To me, what on earth? I don't understand baseball's attitude towards this at all. I truly don't. Why on earth haven't they done this a long time ago? You shouldn't be at risk. Some people can't catch a fly ball. There's people out there for various physical reasons or whatever that have no chance of doing anything but getting hit by a foul ball. Probably you and I included.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's some right fielders that can't take a screamer down the, heading towards the.
Right. Yeah. So, why? It just can't be money. It just can't be the money of it. And so I think because in baseball world, it would cost 6 figures to put nets up at every, per net, right? That's a cheeseburger for Major League Baseball. That's not it. And so what they're really worried about here is they're worried about irritating their big money fans who've paid a lot of money for tickets right on the field level. Their season ticket holders. That's what they're worried about. They don't want season ticket holders to complain that their view is obstructed because of a net in front of them. Well, guess what? So what? Deal with it. If you don't like it, turn your tickets in. Other people will buy them. I think that's really what they're worried about. And the idea that Major League Baseball just doesn't just do it is just amazing to me. And they should have done it 30 years ago. It's not like the game has changed in 100 and whatever years that baseball has been around. This has always been a problem. So, but I never would have guessed it was 808. And that's just in 7 years. Amazing. And by the way, it says the injuries include, this is a quote, by the way, I'm looking at, this is Pro Baseball Talk on NBC Sports, and the article here is called, there have been over 800 foul ball injuries in the past 7 years by Craig Calcaterra, who runs this site. And he quotes Major League Baseball as saying the injuries include concussions and permanent vision loss.
Yeah, this research, this study, this article really probably convinced me, I have to say. That's 100 a year they're averaging, above 100 a year.
Yeah.
You said
800
plus in 7 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that seems like too many. What my question is, I guess they just know they got this locked down, but how much of a liability risk are they putting themselves in?
None.
I guess, the ticket is your waiver, I guess.
The ticket, there's a license. All a ticket is, from a legal perspective, is a license for the ticket holder to come watch a game. And with that license comes a release of liability. It used to literally be printed on the back of a ticket. Yeah, and today there's I don't know what the percentage, but certainly the bulk of tickets are probably electronic nowadays, and so it's literally not printed on there. But if you read the fine print when you click through and accept the ticket, the license is there, and so you are releasing the teams of liability. And what you're doing is you're accepting the risk from a legal perspective that injuries may occur. And so really that's why you don't see lawsuits about this, because there really is no liability. That doesn't mean that from a moral perspective, for God's sakes, baseball ought to do a better job. Hockey, who I know you're a fan of, Chris, I'm not a huge hockey fan, but hockey did do this.
Yes.
John, our buddy John brought this up when we talked about this before. Like 30 years ago, whatever, don't quote me on the number, but a couple decades ago, hockey saw this problem, of hockey pucks flying into the stands, and a hockey puck is a hard plastic disc. That's not going to go well for the recipient. That's the problem. And why baseball hasn't figured this out before now, God only knows.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I realized it, but the idea that you would have that many incidents and zero, 800 plus incidents, 0 lawsuits. It's pretty good evidence that they are in the free and clear here in their actions. It'd be interesting to see if there is any kind of public outcry and if they do force their hands to put these nets in. I think the nets are inevitable. It's one of those things where they ought to just take the pain now and get it over with. But we'll see if this story has any legs or if there's any movement, or do more people, I guess, have to die or get gravely injured, blinded, etc.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I have 2 kids who played baseball at a pretty high level, and I've been to a lot of baseball. I've been to more baseball games than almost anybody out there. Certainly, than most of you. And do you really want to watch a baseball game through a net or a fence? No, not really. But at the same time, I've had screamers hit dead at me that have been stopped by nets and fences. And I'd much rather have that and just look through a hole, than get hit by a baseball, So I've been for it all along.
Yes. All right. So our other baseball topic is, I find, we went from screamers to laughers here, and that's the owner of the Colorado Rockies, and the privileged son of a meatpacking empire, it looks like, I guess, was claiming poverty and his inability to improve the team over the next couple of years by adding talent, et cetera, paying for a better team.
Yeah, okay, so this is the Colorado Rockies. Their payroll in 2019 was a payroll between 145 and 150 million, which is mediocre. It's ranked 12th. It was ranked 12th at the beginning of the season. So what he's saying here is, we're cash strapped. We can't afford to hire better players. He may be right in a sense, in that it's possible for baseball teams to lose money, unlike NFL teams where it is impossible to lose money. At some level, he may be cash strapped, in that maybe his net income is dwindling down to 0. Everybody should have 0 sympathy for him, mind you, but he may be right. But one, it's impossible to know because it's a private entity and we don't really know. And what he may be doing is just protecting his 8-figure income rather than spending it on the team. So what it is certainly an awful look. You don't want to say this, but you're a billionaire and you're going to say, oh, I can't afford to, I bought this team, but I can't afford to spend money on it. Meanwhile, the guy who's like the electrician just wants to watch his Rockies win. So you don't have sympathy for him, and you should not have sympathy for him, despite the fact that what he's saying might be actually true.
For sure. But there's 2 other pieces of data that the article talks about and that the story has, in that, one, they have a pretty good gate receipts, right? They're actually a popular team. They do very well in their local market. So he's got brisk business at the gates. And 2, now, granted, it doesn't kick in until 2021, which I think is actually the subtext here. They just signed a new TV deal that doubles their TV revenue. So at the 2 giant metrics of how teams do financially, how they do at the gate and how they do in their local television contract. You really don't need to look at any other two things to see the fiscal health of the team. They're doing fine, and their revenue projections are growing. So it's a really bad look. And you could say, well, of course, you're gonna cut salary and you're gonna go cheap until the TV deal kicks in, which would actually be a fairly legitimate, that makes financial sense. So that's really what's at play. What I also find hysterical is they just poorly managed the team. And I would almost, at some point, some of these guys have to come out and say, hey, listen, we've done a bad job. It's put us in a bit of a financial crunch. It's going to take us a little bit to dig out of it, but we're still going to do everything we can in our power with the resources at hand. And we're going to, coach them up better in some way and fight through. But it looks like relief is on the way. How is that a hard narrative?
It's not. I would respect these guys more. Like the owner of the Rockies, if he just came out and said, look, I want my annual net income to be $20 million a year. And under the current income levels, if I spend $20 million more on net payroll, that's going to take me below what I want to make. If he just came out and told me that, I would respect him a lot more. I'm different, though. I mean, I would just rather hear the blunt truth about stuff like that. But I would respect that more than this pretend, we're capped and we're going to do the best we can. And really what he's doing is just protecting himself. Just tell me, for God's sakes. Just say it. I would respect you if you did that. Just come out and say, I want to make this much money a year and I can't if I increase the payroll. I'm probably in a minority, but I would respect that more.
I think it would be amazing. I don't even think he has to go that far and still be honest and forthcoming. That's he doesn't even have to do that. And also, you signed bad contracts,
right.
And in baseball, there's a demarcation line for owners to basically do. They don't say it in your directness, but every team, every owner, whatever, has to make a decision if they're going above the luxury tax or they're staying below it, which is basically your admission that I don't want to spend this much. I don't want to incur the tax. And so we're going to do everything we can to maximize, wins on the field and our financials while being under that and not willing to pay that tax. It's very clear. Like the way baseball's economics are, it lets you kind of know from a yes-no perspective which owners are willing to do that and not. And there's nothing wrong with saying I'm not paying a luxury tax. I'm not even saying that as a negative. That's how
just tell us. Operates. Just say it. Just tell us. Now, for those of you, here's the other side of this. For those of you out there who are pro player and rooting for guaranteed contracts in the NFL, this is an end result of that, okay? So all baseball contracts are guaranteed. That's not the case for basketball, although basketball probably 95% of them are, but they're not all guaranteed in basketball. Baseball, basically they are. And so the result of that is that there's a lot less roster flexibility and a lot less payroll flexibility. Because in the NFL, if the player you sign to the massive deal doesn't work out, you can just get rid of him. The teams can just get rid of him in a year or two, maybe. What they're not locked into is 8 years of this dude. Like the Phillies are locked into Bryce Harper no matter what. If Bryce Harper falls apart and becomes a crappy player and hits 211 with 5 home runs a year, they're still going to pay him whatever the number is, $30 million a year, whatever it is. And that's going to put a crunch on the Phillies payroll. Whereas if that was in the NFL and they signed a running back to a huge contract and it doesn't live up to it, well, in almost any case, in 2 years, they can get rid of the player. And so be careful what you root for out there, people, because if you want guaranteed contracts in the NFL, this might be the result. What you might have is teams going, we're tied down payroll-wise, don't ask us to improve because we can't. And so this is the other side to it, and that's why, from a fan perspective, having teams with an out clause in contracts in the NFL is actually good for the game. That's not why the owners do it. The owners do it because they want to protect themselves, but in a sense, it's better for the game.
Yes, and I think there's many middle grounds between the two, but and you can also make a case like no one had a gun to the Rockies' heads and said sign Ian Desmond to a long-term contract at that stage in his career,
right?
but they did, and the Nationals decided that wasn't worth their time, effort, and resources, and one's in the playoffs and one's not. So it is also, it's sports, it's about wins and losses and smart decisions towards those two goals.
And by the way, go Dodgers. Dodgers, Nationals, go Dodgers. Hopefully by the time you guys hear this, it'll be over and the Nationals will be sitting at home and the Dodgers will be moving on.
Looks like it's going to be a series.
Well, I mean, they got Kershaw, in the postseason. Clayton Kershaw is not regular season Clayton Kershaw. He just can't handle the pressure. And this is coming from a Dodger fan. But be that as it may, yeah, I mean, the Rockies signed Ian Desmond and Charlie Blackmon and, all those guys for sure. All my point is you can't have it both ways in some respect. If you want the players, if you're rooting for the players to get paid, I respect that. That's fine. Just understand that the consequences, it is tying down player payroll. It's particularly in a salary capped league. Because like you said, Major League Baseball, you can choose to go over the luxury tax. The Yankees and whoever else, they're going to do it, right? And they can choose that, and that's fine. The NFL does not have that luxury. The NFL has a hard cap. You cannot exceed the cap. And so if you want to guarantee contracts, there's a price to be paid. Look at the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. The Vikings 100%.
Yeah, that is your cautionary.
Yeah, they signed him to a fully guaranteed $84 million 3-year contract. Do you think they would rather be able to dump him? And all Redskins fans knew it was going to happen. They knew he was going to perform in under the lights, when the bit moments are biggest, because he didn't do that for years in Washington. And now the Vikings are stuck with him for a year and a half more. That's the other side to this when you're rooting for guaranteed contracts.
All right, so some good stuff. So everyone, I don't know, tithe to your local charity and for the owner of the Rockies, so he can get through the next couple of years.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully he can afford to pay his rent. Let's just hope. I mean, because the other side to this, people understand. I've been around a couple of pro sports owners. I'm not on their Christmas card list, but I think I've said on this show and other shows that I was outside counsel for a couple NFL teams, and one a lot more than the other. These owners are businessmen first, okay? Understand that they may be fans of the team, they may like their team, but this isn't a fan-run organization. It's a business like any other. The owners probably want to win more than they want to lose, but at the end of the day, what they want to do is make money. Understand that that's not a Dan Snyder problem, unique to Dan Snyder or anybody else. It's a business first. Period. The end. It is a business, and these owners want to make money like any other business owner. And the more fans understand that, the better off we are. Just don't expect them to choose winning over money. No owner, most can't say none. Most owners are not going to do that.
Word. All right, we got one quick topic that we often talk about in the fall, and that is the ups and downs of the NFL TV ratings. And we're coming, are we in the midst of a dead cat bounce or a true bounce to some level of new normal, which is, lower than what it might have been in the early 2000s, but maybe a bit higher than it was just a couple years ago. And so are we finding a new normal? But the primetime games in general, but the Thursday night games actually have been a bit of an interesting test case. One, it's the newest night, which there's football. A lot of fans, a lot of players, a lot of people have a lot of feelings. There's a lot of feels about Thursday night football. So it actually provides kind of an interesting test case because you could make an argument that, and this would be statistically true, that they underperform the other primetime games. Traditionally, they've had crappier games, which has also been a thing. But this year, Thursday night football, especially when it's on Fox, just because it's broadcast television, has been doing rebounding anywhere from 12 to 16% to previous, comparable games the previous seasons. The same week, same kind of matchup. There's lots of ways that they might slice and dice that. And there's two things that are interesting. One, which I think I've mentioned before, but the gulf between what's considered a hit at any other time in prime time. So something like Young Sheldon hit on CBS. It's a spin-off of Big Bang Theory. Is considered a success when it's between a rating of 1 and 2. Like that's the top of the food chain in primetime scripted or reality entertainment.
What's the cost of production of Young Sheldon versus the cost of production of the NFL?
I would have to go and research that, but I'm sure the NFL, the production of it probably dwarfs it just because of scale.
Yeah.
But Young Sheldon probably is an expensive show in accordance to its peers.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to know the answer specifically. It was a rhetorical question. I mean, the problem is, the ad rates for the NFL have to be bigger because they're paying so much money. And so they can get away with Young Sheldon having a rating of 1.8 or whatever because their production costs are low. And so the fact that the ad rates are a lot lower because the ratings are lower is okay, and there can still be a profit margin. And I can tell you're trying to find them.
For sure.
Here, while you're looking. So let me talk.
No, I'm just trying to see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so
I was going to give the comparable. Let me just give the comparable for
Go
what this Thursday's game did compared to the Young Sheldon in the early returns, and they have basically what they call the fluid, like the fast turnaround, live and same day. They have all different ways they slice and dice this. Basically, they give you a fast number quickly, and then they'll crunch data over the next week to give. Some
that's called the overnight. They have the overnights or one thing. Yeah.
And so Thursday night did a 6 compared to something like a Young Sheldon as a 1. To just, and that's all wildly lower than it was 20
Now,
15,
do you have
10 years ago.
what the numbers translate to household viewers?
Yes. So that is 13 million watching this week's Thursday night and 8 million at Young Sheldon.
Okay, so then in other words, 8 million Young Sheldon? Okay, so the scale is off there because you said the ratings for Young Sheldon were what?
Yeah, that's weird. I might
I think we have it right. So see if you can find out per one share how many viewers that translates to. And here's the thing, while you're doing that. From a basic marketing strategy, you can give somebody too much of a good thing. The good marketers know how to hit the sweet spot. Like I would argue, for example, there's too many superhero movies. Like you saturate the market. And a good example of it are like these rock bands or musical acts who tour and tour and tour, and they'll hit the same market 3 times in a year. Well, at some point, no matter how good you are, you've oversaturated the market. And this can happen to the NFL too. And so the fear in the past couple of years, I think, was that Thursday Night Football was a little bit of an oversaturation of the market because the ratings are always lower. The games weren't, the quality of the product sometimes wasn't as good because there wasn't enough time to prepare. So I think that was a fear. But what I think we found and what you've shown with these ratings is that really wasn't the case. It wasn't an oversaturation case because the ratings have rebounded. It was probably tied to the NFL's other problems, which were, the optics of the NFL were bad for a couple of years. And the product of the game, the quality of the game wasn't as good. But they've had some good games. And so I don't think Thursday Night Football is oversaturation. It's just a matter of finding good games more than anything else. You still looking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking. I'll give up the ghost here. So no, I got it. I'm just saying we're not in the next couple of minutes. We're not going to get it completely right anyway. But last Thursday, so not the Seahawks-Rams game. So looking at last Thursday's game, when they adjusted all, the kind of final tally had 17.62 million people watching.
That was Rams, Seahawks?
No, that was the week before, the Thursday before. I can't remember. I think it was Eagles, Packers.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
17.6.
Yeah. Pretty marquee games, good game, turned out to be a good game, etc.
And what was the rating?
The rating was...
You can tell we prepared for this, folks.
Yeah. All right, whatever. I don't have it right now. We'll
put
the show notes.
We'll figure it out because now it makes me wonder. But I think the NFL needs to be careful about oversaturation. That's my point. And I had begun to think maybe they were oversaturating the market because people are going to get tired of people are going to get tired of a good thing eventually. You can't eat pizza and ice cream every night because then pizza and ice cream doesn't become a treat anymore. That's kind of the idea here. And I think what we've shown and what you've shown here is that the NFL hasn't actually reached that point. That's my point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would have. This surprises me. I would have it too much of a good thing theory on Thursday Night Football. But I've actually come around to actually enjoy. I've actually started this year. I have noticed myself looking forward to the Thursday night game It's also sometimes easier just to watch a primetime game. There's not as much conflicting things on a weekend, et cetera, et cetera. So knowing that there's a couple of places where you can sit down and watch the game or whatever is appealing. So I think the perception is changing a little bit. And there's two things that I think that we have to mention. One, I think you can tell the NFL has made their scheduling has treated Thursday night a little bit better. Like, they realize they can't just slap football on any time. Like, they still have to curate the quality of games on Thursday nights that they do similar to Monday and Sunday. They can't just slap on Jets-Dolphins because it's a division game.
And expect to do well. You have to have, and I think you're right. I think they're making more of an effort to have better games, and it's a big complex algorithm to get scheduling done, and it's a problem. But I think you're right. I think they do realize that. Now, I hate the color rush uniforms. That's a whole nother matter entirely. God, it's just awful. I hope the Redskins never have to wear them, ever. But I think you're right. I mean, make a better effort to have better games, and you're going to have better ratings. Simple.
There we go. All right, well, there's more to talk about. We'll talk about it, I guess. I'm sure we love ratings talk. Well, next time we'll be a smidge more prepared, but we gave you the basics. Steve, what do you want people to know about the Hog Sty Network? Okay,
Hog Sty Network, we're obviously in the middle of the season here. So, we're doing 2 Hog Sties a week. Pre-game, post-game. Seasons of Discontent comes out on Mondays during the season now, so watch out for that. That's Rick Snyder's take on Washington sports and life. Pay attention to Big Heads Media, because we're on Big Heads Media now, and they've got a whole bunch of other good shows. If you want good podcasts, check out Big Heads Media, because anything you could possibly dream up, they've got a show for it.
All right, and you can, of course, the Hog Sty Twitter account. It's Just Business Twitter account for all stuff related to those 2 channels. You can find me at ChrisLarry33. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.